Well, folks, hello, good morning. Unfortunately, I lost the thing that I was making last time, but I can remake it and put it up on Canvas for you later today. But continuing what we were talking about last time, we're looking at the difference between capitalism and socialism, and I spent most of the time last time talking about capitalism, and then we were just starting to scrape the surface of socialism. But basically what we really need to look at in terms of these two terms is, once again, this idea that the two terms are not mutually exclusive. In other words, it's not an either-or scenario. There is situations across the world today where capitalism and socialism, overlap, okay? And we have it right here in our own country. And so when we were talking about socialism last class, okay, in terms of the definition of socialism, when we think about socialized policies, okay, socialist policies or socialized programs are ones paid for by tax dollars and run by the government in order to provide certain services to the people in a nation. And this could include things like police, fire, schools, okay, also postal service, DMV, libraries, what else? Various programs, okay. For example, like, unemployment benefits, Social Security for old folks, etc. Okay? These are all considered socialist programs or socialized programs. All right? And the United States has these. Okay? So when we ask ourselves, is the United States capitalist or socialist? It's not an either or. It's how capitalist versus socialist is the United States. And in other places, okay, they have other systems that are socialized as well, like healthcare. If you go to a lot of places in Europe or in Canada or whatever, they have a public paid-for healthcare system that people can take advantage of, as opposed to paying like the way it works in the United States. We don't have public healthcare in the United States. We have a system that requires people to purchase insurance, okay, from private companies, insurance policies, and those insurance policies are what are used to pay for healthcare services. Of course, the question becomes, if a person is poor and they don't have an insurance policy and they get sick or injured, who pays for their health care? And the answer is everybody else who's already paying insurance premiums, right? Because this is what has created a system in the United States where healthcare has become exorbitantly expensive. And the costs of healthcare are recouped from people who actually do pay for their healthcare services. But there's a lot of people. The thing about healthcare in the United States, if you show up at the hospital, the doctors at all hospitals across the country are required to take something called the Hippocratic Oath. And what the Hippocratic Oath is the Hippocratic Oath is a promise to do no harm. In other words, if a person is ill and in need of immediate healthcare attention, doctors are obligated by law to provide healthcare to attempt to save someone's life. Let's say they were in a car accident or something. The thing is if it's a person who got into a car accident who doesn't have any money or insurance, they still get treated, but then they don't end up paying for their services. And this can create situations where people go bankrupt as a result of medical bills. It also creates a system where, because there are people who take advantage of getting the health care without being able to pay for it, those people who are able to pay for it end up paying more for future services as a result of doctors having to raise the cost of healthcare services to pay for people who show up in the emergency room and aren't able to pay their healthcare bills. So it drives the cost of it up for everyone, and ultimately to recoup those costs, they go to insurance companies, and insurance companies pay out if there are certain regulations met, and so on and so forth. So healthcare is a tricky one. We don't have socialized healthcare in the United States, but a lot of places do have socialized healthcare. All right. If we were to take a look at, like, if we think about imagery, okay, if we think about imagery to, let me put this over here on the side so I can see what's going on. If we think about imagery that would be representative of either socialism or capitalism, we could go here. Okay, let's do this. McDonald's. Okay, McDonald's images. Okay, here we'll dump, maybe I can't do that. Copy image. Can I paste this here? Whoa. Okay. We got McDonald's. In fact, I'll even make it smaller. We got McDonald's. We got, what else would be a good one? Nike. Okay. Copy image. Paste. Boom. Bring this down to size. Okay. What else? Google. Copy image. Paste. All right. Private companies, right? As well as all sorts of, ExxonMobil. Right. This is a gas company, right? So boom. Copy link address. Or it's not a link. Copy image. And then paste this over here. All right. Chevron. Copy image. Put this over here. All right. Here's capitalism. Okay, capitalism is about private companies, right? Remember that capitalism is referring to individuals and companies. Okay? Emphasis on private companies thrive in a capitalist environment. And that's a good thing for some services, It's good that we have private companies, because private companies come up with new innovations, they compete with one another, and we benefit every single day from capitalism here in Southern California, okay? There's not one person that can't honestly say that their lives have been made better in Southern California by capitalism, okay, in some way or another, all right? And I'm not saying that capitalism doesn't have other aspects to it that can be really destructive and bad, okay? But in general, in people's day-to-day lives, we benefit from capitalism. We benefit from being able to, as individuals, purchase goods that we want to have, okay? That's a good thing. The thing is when you allow for conditions in capitalism to take over your life. And what I mean by that is this. There's going to be a point, I think, probably in many of your kids' lives, where you take a look at the things that are valued in America. And a lot of the things that are valued in America in terms of material wealth, all right, whether that's becoming extremely wealthy and having a bunch of money in the bank account or in your retirement account or whatever, or buying a huge house, buying a whatever, brand new Ferrari, buying, a bunch of toys, of things, makeup, hair products, whatever. Okay, we benefit from being able to purchase things that we want to buy. However, if you let the things that you want to buy define you, that's a problem. All right? Capitalism is good within reason as long as we keep our priorities straight about what's important in life. Okay? And what's important in life is, to a point, having enough money to be able to survive with some degree of comfort. Okay? What's not important in life is thinking that somehow your self-worth will ever be defined by how much money you have or how many possessions you own. Okay? At the end of the day, all of that stuff is just stuff. You can't take it with you, all of our lives are only temporary, right? And the stuff that we have in our lives is just stuff that makes life sometimes easier or more fun or more enjoyable, but they're not the things that define life. And there are problems that emerged in the early Industrial Revolution. It's been happening, Arnav. That's kind of why I'm talking about this. I think people in the United States and around the globe have this belief that one day when they're wealthy, one day if they make enough money and buy enough things, one day my life will be worth something. Okay? One day people will respect me because I'm rich. One day people will respect me because they see me in a huge house and in a fast car or whatever. Okay? Or even more basically materialist, which is like the whole idea of, people making money off of the image that they portray online of themselves, of whatever. Yeah, you never will be you never will be happy, Arnav. You're absolutely right. Okay. Kids, I'll tell you what, man. I've worked really hard my whole life, and I went to college. I got a teaching job when I was I started my first teaching job on my 25th birthday. I got hired when I was 24. My first day of school was the day that I turned 25. And I am 37 now. I've been doing this a long time. And when I was younger, there were certain things that I was chasing after in life, like, material possessions, right? And what you start to realize about that is it's a never-ending treadmill of stuff that you want to buy, but it never really fills you up, okay? It's like empty calories, right? Empty calories. You're eating food that has no health benefit to you. When you're consuming goods all the time, it has a tendency, all of your happiness is always going to be short-lived because you're always going to be chasing after the newest thing that you can buy. But you come to a point, at least I came to a point, and I think that hopefully you guys will too, hopefully sooner in life than I did, where you realize like all that stuff, sure, it's nice, it's nice to have fast cars and so on and so forth, but none of it really makes you happy, okay? I had a 1968 Chevelle a really nice car, okay, like a muscle car, an old school muscle car. And I had it for maybe about 10 years. And it was awesome. I enjoyed it. But at the end of the day, it's just a car. I sold it. It's like, that's not going to make you happy in life. What makes people happy in life, all I'm trying to say for you guys, live life for yourselves. Don't live life to become a pawn of capitalism and just try and fill your life up with meaningless junk. Live your life up to fill your life with things that you love, And when I say things that you love, I mean things that bring you fulfillment, okay? Material goods are a hopeless avenue to find fulfillment. Fill your life up with friends. Fill your life up with people you love, with doing things that you love. And it doesn't have to be big things, It could be something simple. It could be something very, very simple. If you enjoy whatever, if you enjoy hiking, go and hike. If you enjoy making music, make music. If you enjoy playing basketball, play basketball. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be things that, exactly, man. Absolutely. Cleaning cars, 100%. I love detailing my car. I have about 3 cars right now, which itself is unnecessary. But here's the difference: is I have the cars, but I don't care. I could sell them tomorrow and be fine. It's like I have them just because I enjoy it, but I don't. I enjoy, like I have a Jeep and I enjoy off-roading, but it's not necessarily capitalist oriented. And if I I enjoy it, but it's not something that like defines my life. Now, the music thing for me, making music is very important to me in my life, and it's something that I genuinely love doing. But I don't love doing it because I want people to be jealous of, my synthesizers or anything like. It's not showing off. It's just I love doing it, and those are the things, And I'll tell you another thing that you might not realize. Okay, another thing that you might not realize, yet at this point in your life is that. I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something. Oh, this is what I was going to say. Hopefully you realize this soon. Another thing that you may not realize that's one of those things that fills you up, okay, that's fulfilling, is your education. Now, you have to pay for your education. That's just the nature of the system that we're in. But in order to get credentialed and be exposed to various ideas and work with people who have, acute knowledge and understanding of things, when you go to college, your education is one of those things that you pay for it, but it's one of those things that no one can ever take away from you. Okay? No one can take your education away from you. When you learn new things, that's your knowledge now. Okay? And it gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you a sense of a sense of understanding, a sense of it's true, Arnav. I mean, education is so important, man. Your education is the key to unlock any avenue in life that you want. And I'm not just saying education from the sense of going to college, although I do think that is important. I think that people should strive to become educated no matter what they do. If you wanted to become a mechanic, there's no way of becoming a mechanic without becoming educated on how cars work, right? The key is to match what you're becoming educated in with the things in life that are fulfilling to you. So for me, those things are history, music, okay? And to some extent, I try and educate myself regularly by reading. I watch a lot of documentaries. Education, learning new things, guys, is such an important skill in life. It's hard to overemphasize it. It's that important. I think that depending on what you want to do with your life, if your passion is to become a brain surgeon, that's going to require a lot of education. All right? But if your passion is to become something else, right? And instead you feel forced to, get a job that's simply going to make you a lot of money. And that's really the reason that you're going into whatever avenue that you're doing. Making a lot of money, I have friends, all right, who are lawyers who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, okay? Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But if you ask them how happy they are, okay, they're miserable. They're miserable because they work all the time. They're in huge amounts of debt from having to go to school and get a doctoral degree and so on. And that isn't necessarily going to be the pathway to a fulfilling life. It's different if you want to be in that scenario, if you want to be working all the time, if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, and you love it. If you love it, then you're in the right position. If you love it and you find it fulfilling and you find it rewarding and you have a sense of accomplishment from it, those are the things that are important, not just doing it so that you're making money that ultimately you don't even have enough time to spend or enjoy, because you're working 60 hours a week or whatever, all right? And so, just absolutely, that's really what I'm getting at here. Anyhow, if we were to take a look at, socialized things, those aren't going to be companies because they're public institutions. So, for socialized things, we would have to, put into place things like this, libraries, okay, police services, okay, police, copy, image, paste over here, okay, police, post office, all right, United States Post Office, copy image, boom, all right, put the post office over here, all right, schools, right, we'll put this, let's see here, we'll put this one in here, copy image, paste, okay, these are what we call socialized services. Now, another aspect of socialism. Okay, if we take a look at, let me go over to let's see here. Let's go to talking about competition. Okay, competition. Okay, in capitalism, when we talk about competition, in capitalism, Private businesses, companies, compete with one another to make new services, new goods, bring down prices, innovations. Okay, capitalism is fueled by competition. Okay, capitalism is fueled by competition. Where this can become problematic is if a company gets so huge and wealthy that it begins buying out the other companies. Okay, and this can create monopolies. So competition is good in capitalism until it gets to a point where if a company becomes so huge that they start buying out all the other companies, and now there's only one company left to purchase things from. And that's a problem because capitalism relies on having many different companies competing with one another in the marketplace. Okay, we think of capitalism as promoting what we call the free market. Remember the association that we've made with capitalism last class and liberalism. Whereas when we talk about competition in socialist policies, with socialized programs, because social programs and services are meant to be used by everyone. In other words, they are public services, okay, as opposed to private, okay? Also, like for example, parks. Okay, parks would be another example of like another thing that's paid for by city governments, maintained by the city, okay? But it's meant for everyone in the city to be able to go and enjoy the park, okay? But because social programs are paid for by tax dollars and meant to be used by everyone, that means that wait 1 second here. That means that competition tends to be reduced. This results in the services being provided usually at a reduced quality, okay, or at the expense of long lines, and also lesser motivation from the workers, okay? Because here's the thing, all right? Let's take an extreme example. Let's say we went to communist Russia, the Soviet Union, which was communist, the most extreme form of socialism, where there was no private industry. What happens is when you have people working in the government, okay, it has a tendency to result in, take the DMV, actually let's just take it to something that you may be more familiar with, the DMV. No one likes going to the DMV. There's not one person on the planet that likes going to the DMV. And you have to ask yourself, why is my experience at the DMV so different from my experience at, say, a store, okay, a private company store? And the answer is that in the store, the stores are competing with other stores. And so they want to keep your business. The DMV doesn't compete with anyone because everybody has to go to the DMV. But why do we have the DMV if everybody hates going there? Well, I want you to consider the alternative to that. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that the way that you had to get your driver's license was to go to private companies. What this would result in is that certain private company licenses would be accepted. Let's say that the private companies, let's just make them shoe companies. Let's say that you can buy your driver's license from Nike and have a Nike license, or you can buy your driver's license from Reebok and have a Reebok license. Okay? What this would create is a situation where then cities would partnership with private companies, and your driver's license wouldn't be valid in some cities because, we only accept Nike licenses, but you went the cheap route and you got the Reebok license. We don't accept those here. Okay? It creates a nightmare system where you have certain people who accept some companies of licenses, and then you have other people who don't have the license or can't afford those licenses. It creates a major headache and a major problem. So instead of that, we agree to have the DMV because that way everybody who has a driver's license is monitored by the state. There's accountability for people who don't have driver's licenses, and everybody operates in the same state law system surrounding driving laws, licensure laws, passing your DMV test to make sure that you're not going to get on the road and kill someone. Okay, but because there's no other way of going about it, that means that the DMV isn't competing with any other DMVs. It doesn't matter what DMV you go to, all of their money goes to the state. So the people working at DMVs tend to not really care that much whether you walk out of there with a pleasant customer satisfaction review. They don't care. Okay, people who work at the DMV are working there to make a wage, to be able to fund their own lives, okay, because it's stable work and so on. And I'm not trashing people who work at the DMV. I want to be clear. All right, I'm just simply saying that because in socialized systems there's no competition, there's reduced competition at least. What this results in, a license is $300 with all the documents. Yeah, but $300 is like, to you that probably seems like a lot of money because, $300 is nothing to sneeze at. It's like, it's a lot of money, sure, but it's not like $3,000, okay? And you never know what would happen in a situation if private companies were the ones that were handing out driver's licenses. That would be a real nightmare. All right, but I guess to go back to what I was trying to say here, a lot of times when it comes to government work, and I'll include teachers and police officers in this as well, not all the time do you get the cream of the crop, okay? You don't always get the cream of the crop. And what I mean by that is there are people who find ways into these positions, all right, that may not be very good at their jobs. And they don't have to work that hard in their jobs because they have some degree of protection from unions and other things like that, or from the state, or you name it. And this can become problematic because what it creates is a situation where because, you have, and you guys know this probably from your own experiences. You've probably had teachers who phone it in. They don't work very hard. They don't really care that much about the kids. or they're in teaching for the wrong reasons. Either, sometimes teachers get into teaching for reasons of like, whatever. It could be anything. Trying to, feel better about themselves, try and be popular with their kids. If you're trying to become, a teacher for power struggle reasons, you're entering into it for the wrong reasons, right? Or just other things, it has a tendency to attract people who, and this can happen. I want to be clear that you can get bad workers in any line of work, okay? Private companies hire and fire bad workers all the time. All right, it's not that you don't have people who are slacking off in their jobs in private industries. Certainly you do, especially at the upper echelons of the company as you become more important in the company. But it can be problems. Why would you do a job just to harass people? Well, Arnav, I wish I had an answer to that, but it makes as little sense to me as it does to you. But for some people, that is their prerogative, man. Power is an attractive thing. Police have a lot of power, and it's an attractive career for somebody who feels powerless. If somebody feels powerless, one avenue that clicks in people's heads is, well, if I became a police officer, then I would be powerful. And so it does attract, that kind of, it does attract that kind of person from time to time. Not everybody. To be clear, guys, there's plenty of good police officers too. There are people who really care about their work and are in it for the right reasons, just like there are teachers. All right. And so, but all I'm saying is that when we see the government take over programs, there does tend to be a situation where we see competition reduced, because once people get into those positions, there's no other company or whatever to compete against, because the social programs are paid for by the government, regulated by the government, and this tends to result in goods and services being provided at usually a reduced quality or at the expense of long lines, because like at the DMV, because everybody has to go there and there's no other alternatives, there's always huge lines. And this is one of the criticisms of healthcare too, which is like, if you try and get healthcare in Canada, you can be waiting for many, many months before you can get seen by a doctor. And so here in the United States, you can see doctors relatively quickly. Usually, if it's a non-threatening thing and you need to go to the doctor to get like a wart removed or something like that, you make an appointment, you can usually be seen within about 2 weeks. And if you go to urgent care, you can be seen that day if it's something like, that needs to be addressed soon, like strep throat or something like that. All right. But if you need a big procedure, if you needed like a heart transplant, or you needed a bypass surgery, or you needed whatever, all right, you don't want to be waiting around until they can fit you into the schedule, because there's so many other people who are signed up for the same surgery and very few people who can actually perform it. And so there are downsides to socialized programs. Now, if we're being honest, probably one of the most socialized systems in the United States, and it's this way for a reason, is the military. If we take a look at the military is funded entirely 100% by the government. And people who go into the military and serve in, their careers in the military, this is a very socialized type of system. Their food is provided for them, their lodging is provided for them, if you're living on base, that is. Your equipment is supplied to you. You are working for the government. It's about as socialized as you can get. But, it would be chaotic to have a military that was private, okay? To have a bunch of private militaries across the United States would create weird factionalism. I mean, think about the United States military. Obviously, it is run by and operated on behalf of the government. Okay, that's what the military is there for. It is the United States military, the government's, the nation's military. Imagine if private companies had militaries. Okay, what if private companies had militaries? You go into McDonald's and there's the McDonald's military. Okay, like that would be insane. Or any other company, whatever it is. Amazon. What if Amazon started funding their own private military? All right. And now you had this whole wing of the Amazon corporation that was literally the Amazon military. All right. It would create chaos. It would be insane. And here's the thing that's crazy is actually some European nations, when they sent companies over to Africa in the late 1800s to begin mining operations there and stuff like that, private companies used to establish militaries. There were companies who had private militias that protected the company. If you think of them almost, I guess, like security guards, except for, with military type weapons, okay? Security guards are just private companies who essentially have no real legal authority, but they're there as somebody to deter people from stealing from the mall or something like that. All right, but they're not really a military. They're just a private service that will call the cops in the event that somebody steals or whatever, okay, or something happens. So anyhow, let's move forward here. I want to go back to the PowerPoint because I never really finished up talking about some things here. So as industrialization continues to progress throughout the 1800s, industrialized nations start to become extremely wealthy, and non-industrialized nations get poorer, actually. So the rich get richer, the poor get poorer as industrialization proceeds through the 1800s. Less industrialized countries keep providing food and raw supplies to the industrialized ones. What happens in this scenario is that the wealthy industrialized nations go to nations that are not industrialized, and they take advantage of the labor there, they take advantage of the materials there, whether that's farming materials or mining or manufacturing materials or whatever. And what this does is it subdues these poorer nations to be in the service of wealthier ones. And then what happens is after they take those materials from lesser industrialized nations, they bring them back to the industrialized nation, turn them into finished products, and then sell those finished products back to the poor nations for profit. So they're making money on both ends. They're making money on the taking of the goods, and they're making money on the back end by selling finished products back to those nations. And so Britain very early on starts to exploit poorer nations and take advantage of them. And then soon after, the United States, Russia, and Japan all begin to do the same thing. And this is what we know as imperialism. Imperialism, empire is the root word of imperial. All right? And as empires, industrial empires start to grow, they start taking over smaller, weaker, less developed nations. So imperialism is when a country extends its rule over many other lands outside of their country using wealth and a strong economy. And our next unit is the imperialism unit. Okay, so just to give you a heads up, this is the direction that we're heading. Is we're going to be moving into the next unit coming up next week on imperialism. And imperialism takes many forms. If you see some of these images here about and this is obviously somebody who photoshopped this, but Americans coming and planting McDonald's in foreign nations is one form of economic imperialism. But there are other forms of it as well. If you take a look at this map here, all of these regions in red were regions that Britain controlled at one point in time. This was the British Empire in the 1920s. As you can see, Britain has territories from Canada to the Caribbean to South America to Africa to the Middle East to Asia to Australia and to Southeast Asia here and the Philippines and places like this. Okay, so there are tons of territories, New Zealand all the way up to the other side of the globe over here, that Britain controlled. They used to have a saying of the British Empire. They said, the British Empire, an empire upon which the sun never sets. Meaning that at any time in the 1920s, and even before that, going back to the 1800s, at any time, at any given moment, the sun would be shining on some piece of land around the globe that Britain controlled. So when we say, an empire on which the sun never sets, okay, what we're referring to is the fact that at any given time of day, Britain is, making money on exploiting one of these colonies that it has taken over around the globe. Now remember that the British also used to possess the eastern seaboard of the United States here, but by the 1920s we had already broken away long before that. So these used to be British territories right here as well, until we broke away from Britain in the American Revolution. So between 1700 and 1900, huge changes in agriculture, industry, communication, and technology make Western Europe and the United States far more advanced economically than anywhere else. Okay, we're seeing all of these new inventions with steam engines, steamboats, trains, new communications technologies like the telegraph, okay, which allowed people to communicate instantaneously over long distances for the first time using wires. And then we eventually see the development of technologies like radio. And then we see the technologies of film and television and photography expand. And then we move into an era where we have telephones, where people are able to talk with one another, and so on and so forth. Okay, all of these technologies allow for the United States and Britain and other nations that have access to these technologies to advance very rapidly comparative to other places. Now, eventually, of course, over time, these technologies do make their way to poorer nations, but it takes time. India, which is on the map right here as a British territory in the 1920s, this was all controlled by the British Empire. India was completely controlled by Britain for a long time. And if you talk to people from India today or who are of Indian descent, there's a lot of mixed feelings about British colonial rule in India. Because for a long time, India was, basically a puppet of Britain, and was exploited by Britain for Britain to become extremely wealthy and powerful. On the other hand, though, India also was, in some senses, advanced by Britain. Britain introduced hospitals, they introduced new transportation systems like trains, they introduced education systems, and so on into India. And so, it also, if you talk to more conservative militaristic folks from the Indian military, there's a lot of pride about India's involvement in World War I and World War II, serving the British. All right, and so there are other cultural elements that of India that came about as a result of British interference in India, and some of that interference was really bad, and others of that other interference offered innovations to some extent. Despite all these early hardships, the population's health and wealth over time later on rose dramatically in all industrialized nations. Remember what I told you about that, which is that in industrialized nations, when they first start industrializing, there's a dip in health and wealth. Okay, populations are really struggling and the quality of life goes down because people are working in these dangerous conditions. But as time goes on, the conditions improve thanks to social reforms. All right. The emerging middle class meant a wider gap between the rich and the poor, and there's essentially two opinions about government's development. There's the business leader's opinion, which is that the government should stay out of business and economics. And if we go back to our little thing here, obviously the business leaders are going to be on the capitalist side of things. They want to keep the government out of their affairs. But the vast majority of people in the Industrial Revolution, when things start to get bad, the vast majority of people are not wealthy. The vast majority of people are poor. And that's where you get this other side of things, which is that you have the reformer's opinion, which is that the government, in order to improve the lives of the citizens, needs to help improve the conditions for the poor and provide more rights for workers. And so when we talk about socialized policies, this is going to be the opinion of the reformers. Okay, the reformers want to see changes from the government, where the government does things like makes laws about pollution. Okay, the government makes laws allowing for unions. Okay, the government makes laws that outlaw child labor. All right. The government makes laws that determine minimum wage. All right. All of these are examples of the government interfering in the economy by making laws that will help poorer off segments of the population. Okay. Also, things like schools, police, fire, post office. These are services that are used by everyone, regardless if they're wealthy or poor. And so you want your kids to be able to go to school. You want your neighborhood to, be protected by law enforcement. You want your neighborhood to have parks in it that are maintained where you can go and bring your kids to play on the slides and stuff like that. These are all things paid for by tax dollars that people are willing to pay for because it improves their condition in life. All right? No one likes paying taxes. No one likes paying taxes. Paying taxes is a drag. Okay? Of course people would love to keep more of their income. But we hope that the kinds of things that our tax dollars are paying for are going to be things that we're all going to be taking advantage of. Okay, whether that be libraries or schools or the post office or anything else, these are all services that are provided to the people to make their lives easier in some sense. Also, something as simple as roads. Okay, Southern California, particularly in Orange County, okay, but also in other places as well, as you drive across California freeways, they're nice roads. They are smooth roads for the most part. You have potholes here and there, but your tax dollars pay to keep the roads maintained, repair the roads, widen the freeways, do those kinds of things. And we don't like paying tax dollars, but we like being able to drive on roads, and those roads aren't going to build themselves. So the government hires private contractors to fix the roads. So it'll be private companies that may be working on the roads, but the private companies are being paid by the government. Okay, it's not that the government is sending the government road crew out. Okay, they're hiring private construction companies and things like that, but they're paying those private companies with money that the government collected with tax dollars. All right, there's other things too, though. Social Security. Okay, Social Security is where workers pay a little money out of their check every pay period, and this money goes into a national retirement account. Okay? And based on the amount that you contribute, all right, so that when you retire, you can collect money each month from Social Security to pay for food, rent, and living expenses. Okay? That's what Social Security is. And the reason that we have Social Security is because so many people weren't making enough money to be able to set money aside for retirement. Okay? And when you stop working, you stop making money. But it's not like when you stop working, life just doesn't cost anything anymore. You still have to pay for food. You still have to pay for shelter, etc. All right? But there's a lot of poor people who have no savings. They have no savings. And so when you retire, why do you see people who are 80 years old working at fast food restaurants or working at Walmart or whatever? The reason is because they need to make money. Okay? They need to make money. Maybe some of them are doing it just because they're bored and they don't have anything else to do, I guess. All right? But people are working, and no one wants to be working at McDonald's, or at least I can't think of anyone who wants to be working at McDonald's when you're 70 years old. But it happens. Why does it happen? Because people didn't make enough money in their lifetimes to be able to support themselves when they retire. So they retire, they exhaust their whatever, savings they had, and then they realize, oh my gosh, if I want to be able to keep my electricity on, I have to make more money. So they go back out and they work again. And because they don't have any other choice. You have to work to live. And so, Social Security was introduced as a way of having a social safety net for elderly populations who are too old to work or who have worked their whole lives. They just want to enjoy the last few years of their life, but they don't have any money to be able to enjoy it. And there are some pretty startling statistics about this. Let's take a look here. What percent of America has retirement savings? What percentage of U.S. citizens have retirement savings? Data shows that 42% of people aged 18 to 29 have no retirement savings, along with 26% of Americans in the 30 to 44 age bracket. Among those closer to retirement, 17% of people aged 49 to 59 report a complete lack of retirement savings. Okay, and that figure is 13% for age 60 above. So of people in the United States who are 60 or older, 1 in 10 of them, one in 9, 1 in 10 of them has no money, has no retirement savings. Okay? And here's the other thing. Of those that do have money saved, all right, of those who do have money saved, well, okay, I'm saying gratuitous materialistic things, okay? I'm saying going out and buying a bunch of junk, okay, that you think is going to bring your life meaning. But there are things that you do have to buy just to live, okay, which aren't considered materialistic. They're just considered biological necessities like food, okay, or shelter, all right? These, I'm not saying you need to own a mansion, but you do need to be able to pay for your 1-bedroom apartment rent every month or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? It's different. It's different. I'm saying that as you continue to get older, you're still going to have to pay to live to a certain extent, because everybody needs to have money to be able to buy food. Okay? I guess you could go and live on a farm somewhere and grow your own food, but good luck buying a farm if you have no money. That's the other side of it. So the last report, which surveyed 2,000 U.S. adults aged 40 to 79 with at least $25,000, finds many Americans have a ways to go, even those approaching their golden years. Nearly two-thirds of 40-somethings have less than $100,000 in retirement. Okay, less than $100,000. All right. I want you to think about that number for a second. Less than $100,000. All right. $100,000 is about the salary that I make a year, in 1 year. Okay, in 1 year. That's before taxes. I don't take home $100,000 a year, but before taxes, I make about $100,000 a year. All right. And I'm not saying that to brag or anything like that. $100,000 is not exactly what it used to be back in the 1960s. Okay, $100,000 is enough to pay for my 3-bedroom house in Corona and be able to, have my synthesizers. But keep in mind, I don't have other costs like wife and kids and other things like that. So, that's the other side of it. All right. And it depends, Arnav. I mean, teachers in Corona Norco do relatively well for themselves. Teachers in Arizona don't, though. It depends on where you live. And, I would argue, too, that you kind of get what you pay for a little bit. Fortunately, in Eastvale, we have a really nice education system. You guys go to one of the best schools in the country in terms of facilities. Okay, I'm not kidding when I say I think the East-Stem Academy at Eastvale is like one of the most expensive schools in the state of California. All right, and there's a lot of nice schools in California. You know what I mean? And two, the quality of education that you receive at nice facilities is generally going to be better because work satisfaction of the teachers and stuff like that is going to be higher. The teachers are making enough to be able to support themselves and so on. But it's kind of one of those things, a rising tide lifts all ships sort of a deal. All right. If you give poorer parts of the population, and teachers, let me assure you that if you want to be a millionaire, don't become a teacher. All right. But at the same time, if you're making enough money as a teacher to be able to live your life, that's all that should be necessary. I don't need to make so much money that I'm able to go out and buy Ferraris and stuff like that. I don't need that amount of money because that amount of money isn't going to make me any happier. But there is a certain kind of magical number at which, in Southern California, that magical number hovers right around about $90,000 a year. After you make about $90,000 a year, much past that amount in Southern California and less in other places, but Southern California has a really high cost of living. In other places, you could probably live on less money. But in Southern California, if you're making $90,000 a year, making a lot more than that isn't going to dramatically change your life. If you're making about $90,000 a year, you're never going to have to worry about missing a meal. You're never going to have to worry about missing, a car payment or an insurance payment or anything like that. But once you fall below that, the further below $90,000 you make, the more stressful your life becomes as a result of having to budget everything in your life. And you have to start making difficult decisions about what you can and can't afford. And so, that just keep that in mind, that it really, it isn't all about money, and that's not what I'm trying to say. But if you're retiring at 60 and you have another 20 years to live, and you've only saved up, and you only save up $100,000, you're not going to be able to live on $100,000 for very long. Okay. And so, yeah, it is interesting talking about this stuff and learning more about this stuff. All right, moving forward here. So what is economics? Economics help us analyze how goods are produced and distributed and consumed. Basic economic principles: you have supply, which is how much of a good is available. You have demand, which is how much desire there is for the good. You have distribution: where is the product made and where is it going to go? And then finally, the price: what do I have to give up to get that good? And depending on where you are, the economy can be handled by governments in many different ways. And in the early days of industrialization, the governments promoted this idea of laissez-faire economics that we talked about last class. This economic policy lets owners of industries set their own working conditions, run themselves, and essentially do as they please. And this is nice for the companies because they don't want to be having to be following all these rules that the government lays out. The term laissez-faire literally translates to let do. In other words, keep the government's hands off the economy, okay, and let the economy do what it will do on its own. Don't let the government interfere in the economy. And this sounds like it would be a really good idea, and it is to an extent, it is a good idea. But when you get all the way over to very radical laissez-faire economics, companies will start to do things that are really not good for the people. And that's what I was trying to tell you guys about last class. So if a government uses laissez-faire, they're supporting this idea of free trade. The idea that the government should stay out of private companies' business. This means that nations should trade freely without any rules or regulations from governments. Free trade advocates, laissez-faire radical capitalists advocate for getting rid of taxes, getting rid of laws, getting rid of limitations. And many in the early days of the Industrial Revolution believed that this would allow economies to grow and be successful. But what they realized is that if you let private companies make all of the decisions about the economy, it puts consumers into a place where they become increasingly vulnerable. All right? Because as companies grow and become wealthier and more powerful, they end up creating conditions in society that are really, really difficult for your everyday poor laborer working in the factory. And all of these ideas were supported by that guy I was telling you about last class, Adam Smith, when he wrote The Wealth of Nations. And he supported economic liberty, freedom, by creating these 3 economic laws of capitalism. And we talked about these last class. The law of self-interest, where people work for their own good, they work for their own benefit, and they will be rational actors in the marketplace and make their own decisions for themselves. The second law was the law of competition, because competition forces people to make better products. It forces the products to be offered and services to be offered at a lower price. And then number 3 was the law of supply and demand, which is this idea that, that if there is a great enough demand for a good, the supply will naturally, on its own, by individual actors in the marketplace, going about making inventions and coming up with new goods and services to fill that demand. And so the economy you should let the economy figure out supply and demand on its own, rather than forcing companies to make X amount of goods or whatever and set prices of those goods. laissez-faire and capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system that uses some of these laissez-faire principles. What is capitalism? It's that idea that land, labor, and capital, the factors of production, are privately owned, not run by the government. That's what we favor in the capitalist economic system. Private ownership of goods, land, labor, capital. And that people will privately take their money and invest it in businesses to make profits. Now today, we are capitalist, but we're not really laissez-faire, because laissez-faire economics would mean that we have no regulations, no taxes, no limitations on the economy. And we have tons and tons and tons of regulations on our economy. We have tariffs, we have labor laws. We have all sorts of different laws that regulate our economy. We have minimum wage laws. We have child labor laws. We have laws about pollution. We have laws about, Food and Drug Administration. We have all sorts of different regulatory bodies that make sure that private companies aren't just going around creating a predatory environment for all of the consumers and workers at these companies. Okay, I told you the story about the meatpacking industry. There's a very famous book by Upton Sinclair called The Jungle. Okay, Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle in the early 1900s, and it was about the meatpacking industry and how absolutely horrid the conditions were in the meatpacking industry, where the health regulations were miserable. People would be buying meat and getting sick. They'd be buying meat and finding broken off knife blades in it and other things like that. And the government realized, we got to do something to protect the people of the nation from private companies who are, cutting corners and making money and not creating a very, safe environment for the people. And so the government steps in and it's like, you can't just be, packaging meat that has broken blades in it. You can't just be packaging meat that was handled with your bare hands and you didn't wash your hands. These kinds of rules are things that as a society we agree are it's probably a good thing that you have laws that require fast food workers to wash their hands or to wear gloves, okay? Or, other things too. It's probably a good thing that we have laws that make it so that there's a certain amount of money that people have to make in order to be able to, feed themselves or whatever. All right, so laissez-faire and capitalism. You can see here all of these images are representative of capitalism. Capitalists like Smith disagreed that the government should help poor working class folk. Okay, he thought that if the government started making laws about minimum wages and working conditions, that it would eventually slow down economic growth. But the thing is that not everybody believes in laissez-faire like Adam Smith did. Others thought that the government should intervene in private business to help the lower class out because the lower class was having such a hard time struggling through their day-to-day lives. So some of these ideas, I'm going to skip over this little part here, but some of these ideas come out of what is known as socialism, which is an economic system, but it's very different from capitalism. So in socialism, all factors of production are owned by the public, by the government, and they operate for the welfare of everyone equally. Now, in many cases, socialism is considered overly optimistic because it requires humans to be very fair and equal and to be thinking about others than just themselves. And one of the problems that you run into in the United States nowadays is people are so individualist, okay, with all of the selfies and Instagram pages and TikToks and all the rest of it. People are so into themselves. Okay, and when people are so into themselves culturally, okay, when they're really into individualism and this whole philosophy of kind of what do I get out of it? What that means is that people become less concerned about others. And that's a problem because humans should be hopefully looking out for one another. And it can be very difficult for humans to look out for one another when they feel like, even in their own capacity, no one's looking out for them. And so it kind of, these ideas about rugged individualism create very much kind of this dog-eat-dog philosophy. And we want to move away from that because people need one another. People need to help each other out. But those kinds of ideas get viewed as overly optimistic. And humans in general, not everybody's a good person. That's the other side of it. We can't expect that bad people are just going to set aside their behaviors and become good people. Socialists believed that the economy should be, to some extent, controlled by the government. Now, to what extent? Sometimes it's only a small extent, like what we see here. Our government controls certain aspects of our economy, but it doesn't control the whole economy. We have tons and tons of private businesses and capitalism in the United States. But we don't have only private business and capitalism in the United States. Remember, I was telling you last class about the spectrum. It's kind of a sliding spectrum. Okay, and some nations lean more socialized, and other nations lean more capitalized. Okay, socialists believe that if the government controls the economy and regulates businesses with laws, that everyone will be equal, and if not equal, minimally have more equality of opportunity. But again, this isn't always a good thing. Because not everybody is equal in terms of just, if we look at people, not everyone is equal in terms of their ability, their skills, their interests, their work ethic, their motivation, their emotional state. Not everybody is equal. We live in a decidedly very unequal society. So to somehow expect that the government is going to be able to make everyone equal is just not a realistic outcome. In America, we have some socialized systems, like the education system, like I was talking about earlier. Many Western countries also have socialized healthcare systems, which means that governments are run by the government and people don't need insurance to go and get healthcare. A very radical form of socialism was known as Marxism or communism, which was named after Karl Marx, who wrote a piece called the Communist Manifesto in 1848. And in the Communist Manifesto, he argued that the very, 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 very small segment during the Industrial Revolution of the population who was super wealthy, he called them the haves. In other words, you have something, you have wealth, or you have power. Okay, the haves in the Industrial Revolution were kind of the rich middle class bourgeoisie. And Marx basically said you have this tiny group of people who have all this wealth and power, and you have this giant group of people that he called the have-nots, or the proletariat, the working class, okay, who have very little. And so he said that at some point, the have-nots would rise up, just like the peasants, or just like the bourgeois rose up against the noble class in the French Revolution. He said, we might see a different kind of revolution based on industrial capitalism, where you have the working class whose lives are miserable and who become aware of how miserable their lives are, rise up and overthrow the wealthy capitalistic business owners. And indeed, this has happened at times in history, not in America, but in other places. And this was known as class warfare. All right, we are still not quite ready to take the test. So I'm going to push the test until Monday. We're going to finish up talking about this on tomorrow morning. And then we'll have the test on Tuesday. When I see you back on Tuesday will be the day of the test. Just to let you know, I'm going to kind of dump some work. I've been easy on you this week because people have been complaining about workload from their other classes and stuff. I've been easy on you this week, okay? I hope that you recognize that I have done you a favor by lightening up your workload and making it so you have less homework and stuff. But I'm just going to let you know that coming up this weekend, you're going to have homework. Okay, I'm going to assign you stuff that is going to the meaning of it is going to have you practice some of these ideas behind capitalism and socialism that we've been talking about for the last two classes here. So I'm just letting you know we're going to finish up this conversation tomorrow, but expect that tomorrow I'm going to be posting probably about 3 assignments to help you study for the test and begin reviewing the Industrial Revolution unit, so that when we come back next week on Tuesday, all 3 of those assignments are going to be due on Tuesday, and then we're going to take the test on Tuesday morning. Okay, so please have them done by Tuesday. All right, we will see you back here tomorrow morning. Have a great rest of the day.